Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the New England Graphic Medicine Virtual Summit. I'm A. David Lewis from the comfort of my recliner. The beauty of a virtual summit is that you can sit anywhere in your house, especially when you've hurt your back. So this is lovely. I'm fine, though, and I'm delighted to have our presenters here today for this panel, Minding Graphic Medicine's Rise. We're going to hear from Matthew No, shortly be joined by Kathy Leamy, also Maria Fotonakis, and if technology allows, Laura K. Ronan. Remember, my back's okay. It's all right. Thank you, everybody. Please remember, this is being recorded and operates as a public forum. If you have questions for the panelists, please put them in the Q&A so they're not lost in the chat window. However, the chat window is your open space to talk and share resources. So please go right ahead. Kathy Leamy has rejoined us, but she is going to be muted for the moment so that we can hear Mr. Matthew No with his opening presentation. Matthew, I believe you have slides you want to load.
Yes.
Fantastic. I will be here hiding in the background and popping back up either as needed or for the Q&A. So, Matthew, the floor is yours.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm playing with the sizing of this screen. Okay. How's everybody doing this morning? It's very early. I guess maybe it's not. This is normal work start time, but I'm still on coffee cup 1, so I'm not fully caffeinated yet. And we're at home, so that's cool too. And I'm wearing this cool Fight Burnout T-shirt, you know. Yes, Dave, I would still, no, I would be getting to Countway right this moment. It takes me about an hour and a half each way to get to work. So I'm here to talk about graphic medicine. We're all here talking about that, and canonization. And I'm asking this question of, are we on a worrisome path? As I encourage everyone to do in every talk, I have the hashtags and my Twitter handle on the opening slide. So if you want to add me, you can find me there. So this is who I am. This is my cool cartoon character that I use all over the internet. And my pronouns are he, his. I'm a librarian. That's what that MSLS is for. I teach online. And this is all the professional kind of stuff I do. I'm the chair for the Resources and Toolkits Committee of the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable. I co-edit graphicmedicine.org with Ian, MK, and Alice. And I'm right now the treasurer for the Graphic Medicine International Collective, which is a fun thing that I'm learning how to do. So yeah, that's me. That's why you might or may not care about what I have to say. So diving right in, so this is a page from the Graphic Medicine Manifesto. And it's one of my favorite pages in the introduction and the entire book, actually, because it helps set the stage and the tone for the rest of the book, why we're talking about graphic medicine as a manifesto. This quote, manifestos acknowledge that there is not one universal subject. So too, graphic medicine resists the notion of the universal patient and vividly represents multiple subjects with valid and at times conflicting points of view and experiences. I assume most of you have read the manifesto at some point in time. So that's all I'm going to quote out of it. You should go read it if you haven't. But so thinking about graphic medicine as a manifesto, as this resistance to the idea of the universal patient, I have concerns and worries that have been, generating for a while as we build library collections, as more people are teaching graphic medicine, that we're kind of narrowing in on key or core titles already. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit and where I'm worried this could lead us. It might be derailing kind of what we're hoping to do with graphic medicine a bit. You may have seen me tweet that I'm kind of in the middle of this project. I had time planned to finish all of this before COVID-19 happened, so everything's a little derailed. So there's more coherent thoughts of this coming. So let's see, slides work. Why this question now? So this is a timeline I use in pretty much every presentation I do on graphic medicine. It was developed out of this scoping review that I and a few colleagues have been working on for the use of comics in health education. And so it's a combination of those review articles and what I know about the history of comics. So we've got this timeline of before the 1950s, we've got Frederick Wortham and things before then. Articles about graphic medicine are scarce from this time, though there is a lot of work being done by Jared Gardner and folks at the OSU Cartoon Museum to look at graphic medicine in the past and before we really thought about it this way. But I'm not going to go through this whole timeline. My main reason for including this here is that we're in this 2020s and beyond spot now. We've had 10 graphic medicine conference. Oh, my slides have transitioned to something else. Okay, there we go. We've had 10 international graphic medicine conferences. We are now having what is the second New England Graphic Medicine Conference, and all virtual, which is really neat, and kind of a fun proof of concept that we can make these kind of conferences work this way. But so we've had people teaching for a while. Michael Green has had his course with fourth-year med students for quite some time, 11 or 12 years, I think. And so we have this, we're kind of established here. I said at last year's conference closing that I'm not sure that we need to evangelize so much anymore, at least not to each other. We know what graphic medicine is. We know why it's great. We know more or less how it can work or where we think it works. We should still do research and understand more clearly how and why, but we don't need to necessarily be like, hey, comics are a thing. They're great. Let's use them all the time. Let's think more critically about what we're doing. So another reason this has been on my mind is some of you may know Alice Jaggers and I have been working on an annotated bibliography of what we're calling, we had been saying core comics, but I think we're actually calling it essential graphic medicine. This is a grant-funded project by the American Library Association to create basically a collection development tool for libraries so that they have a starting point to begin with building a collection of comics that are health related. Because not everyone knows about this, not everyone knows where to go. A common question we get, both me personally, and I know Alice gets these too, and we also get them to the graphic medicine site, is, well, how do I start? What should a collection look like? Where do I begin? And so we were trying to fill that need. And so we conducted surveys of people in the graphic medicine community and asked, what do you think should be included on a core title list, quote unquote? And so these are some of the responses we got. But this next slide breaks it down. These are the only titles from that survey that were mentioned 5 or more times. It's a fairly small list. This was done during and after the 2018 Graphic Medicine Conference. So there are newer titles that would definitely appear on here now. There are, and you can see, it's a product of its time, but it raised concerns with me that we already have kind of narrowed our scope on what the canon is. No one is calling it a canon, but if these are the titles that people say are key, these are the titles that are being taught in classrooms the most often, then we kind of have started establishing a canon, and maybe we should be critical of that. Yes, Susan, I know this is probably a Q&A thing, but I meant to address that here. It is a problem, and it's kind of the double bind here. For librarians, our whole thing is cataloging and categorization and building these collections. And you want to build a collection, you want to make sure that there are, key titles, that the things people are going to come in and automatically think, oh, graphic medicine, I should expect to find that there. We should build that, but the question is, how do we counterbalance that and making sure that all the voices we can are there, that can be heard, are there as well. So this next slide, as I posted on Twitter, another key book for this project is this greatest comic book of all time. It's kind of a thought experiment by Bart Beatty and Benjamin Wu, looking at the comic studies canon. And I'll read this quote. Each of us probably has our own sense of what are the best or most important comics, but the canon is the one that is backed by institutional power, by reviewers and critics, by museums and galleries, and by scholars and educational institutions. While academics may have questionable influence in determining a work's reputation, they have an unparalleled ability to cement it by the choices that they make of what works to study and teach. So this calls out academics, and for me, as a librarian, the risk here is that we kind of fall both in this scholars and institutions realm and this academics realm, where we're teaching and studying, but also we are one of the power structures in society where we're determining what we keep and what is of value and what people have access to. So we have to be extremely careful and aware of what we're buying and promoting. And I don't know how critically all of us are doing that. Some of that is, institutional policy and memory and pushing back. And some of us have more freedom to fight that than others. I'm in an institution where I have significant, resources and an amenable administration. So I'm in a position to push back. Others may not be. So I think for those of us that have that level of institutional privilege, we have to fight and think about this. So these are just a couple of slides of comics that, if you were to think about the graphic medicine canon as it were right now, these are ones that I see on every list, on people's teaching all over the place. And I want to be clear that I have no issue with any of the creators. I have no issue with anyone teaching any of this or collecting any of this. I just want us to make sure that we're thinking about it all. Because I read and promote and teach all of these all the time too. Here's another slide like that. And then if you tuned into Alice's presentation yesterday about COVID-19, the word intersectionality, and thinking about the voices of the creators, what perspectives they're coming up from, plays a large part in this too. As comes up in every time I guest lecture in a class, people are always like, well, why are most of the voices we're hearing white, English-speaking, middle class? There's a whole apparatus and structure to that. Part of it's the way publishing works. Part of it is the way that people have time and freedom to create stories and get them out there. Marketing, it's all tied together. So that's kind of the where I'm at and why I'm concerned, and what the middle part of this presentation is what's missing. I had started to gather as many people's syllabi as I could. I was looking at the National Library of Medicine's traveling exhibit and their virtual exhibit space. I was looking at library collections and trying to do some level of analysis, looking at, okay, these are what we know from statistically data-wise are being taught and are collected everywhere. I could probably rattle off a list right this moment. I'm not going to, of what I know is pretty much in every library collection, in large part because, I have a little bit I have a little bit of personal guilt with this, because when I'm asked regularly what to start a collection with, I tell people usually the same set of titles over and over again. So I'm complicit in this as well. But so the last part of this is really to how can we combat it, and I kind of try to break it down a bit. Step one that overarches every group of people I'm going to mention here is to think more broadly. I said this yesterday on Twitter when people were asking Brian about if a fire story counts as graphic medicine. And he was like, that's for booksellers and librarians and other people to kind of decide. I very firmly am in the A Fire Story is graphic medicine camp. You're actually going to see a picture of it in a minute. But I basically explode the term graphic medicine as much as I can. And so, a natural disaster certainly counts as graphic medicine. And to me, A Fire Story is also kind of a climate change story, because it's happening during climate change and it's going to be a huge ongoing problem. So think more broadly. That's step one. And so now I'm going to jump into some of these professions I've been naming. So for librarians, some of the other presenters in here will recognize their comics in these pictures. Yesterday, I was scrambling madly to try to find what small print and zines I had here at home still. Most of my graphic medicine comics are in my office, which I am not allowed under order of the president of Harvard University to enter right now. Each one of these slides, I tried to include at least a photo of a few comics that I think we should be encouraging people to use and study and collect in libraries. So for librarians, I've got these questions. What are you putting on display? What are we highlighting? What are we, making obvious to our patrons? Then there's this question of how can you change your purchasing policies? This is kind of the biggest institutional barrier for libraries to collecting works that aren't distributed by traditional main publisher means. Again, I'm in a lucky situation where I can purchase whatever comics I find that are relevant to graphic medicine and have them paid for. A lot of public libraries are basically stuck with the distributors that they're stuck with, and because their policies are set by the city. And so a main part for librarians is to try to advocate for broader means of collection development, allowing librarians to buy things outside of, traditional publishing norms. And then there's what are you highlighting on social media? What are you putting on your LibGuides? Sorry, I keep looking over at the chat and I need to stop because there's so many great questions and I want to address them. But so thinking about what you're highlighting, could you, instead of, I'm really leery of naming creators. Can you hide the chat window? Aha, you can. Thanks, Kathy. Now I'll stop looking at it. So what if instead of highlighting, the same 5 books over and over about mental health, you highlighted 2 of those and 3 small print creators, or 2 of those and 3, web comics? Think about how you can highlight things differently. Pair the book that people know from the New York Times with a book that they would not know unless they went to something like Massachusetts Independent Comic Expo. Pair them together and get people to realize they exist. And then what are you recommending during Reader's Advisory? What are you suggesting to the teachers and the educators in your community? So now I'm trying to make an effort if people ask me, oh, I'm looking for a comic about X, Y, or Z, rather than jumping to the one that I know they can go order on bookshop.org or go to Harvard Bookstore and buy. I'm thinking about, well, what creator could you buy directly from and use in your classroom instead? it's a harder sell, but I think it's something we have to try to do. For educators, thinking about what books you're explicitly assigning, could they be different ones? Do they have, like, do you have to assign, I promise I'm not picking on anyone. Do you have to assign marbles? It's one of the most studied works of graphic medicine that I have seen, one of the most assigned, and there's good reason for it, but does it need to be on your syllabus every semester? Or could you complement it with something else? Since I've already mentioned it, an experiment or an approach I've been thinking about with bipolar comics is pairing marbles with RX, because they're both about bipolar, but Ellen and Rachel had very, very different experiences and shared very different things that happened to them. And making sure that students can see as many ways of living with a health condition there is. Are you experimenting with different formats in your classes? Are you only teaching print comics? I know some people are. I hope that most people are not. Web comics, especially right now, are really easy to find online and make use of in your classroom. You do have to make sure you dedicate time to how different they are to read than print comics, especially if you're reading something that's infinite, like vertical scroll, which is my favorite way to read web comics, but it's a different way of reading. And then how are you discussing them? I kind of touched on this already. Are you ensuring that there are multiple experiences, multiple perspectives on a similar health experience in your syllabus? This might be difficult if you're doing an overview survey course in graphic medicine, but I encourage you to try, even so. And consider an assignment I would love to see is for you to, like, maybe for a final project, I think Dave has done this actually, is invite your students to pick a text from either a list that you already have, or invite them to go out and find a comic that's graphic medicine and read that and argue with you on why that counts.
Yes, in fact, that's the final unit for my undergrads at MCPHS University. They have to go find a text that they would say is graphic medicine that we have not covered over the semester. I'm also interjecting, so Matt can take a sip of beverage.
Thank you. And so if you're an educator and want to do that, email Dave. He's already got a plan on how to make it work. So for scholars, I'm going to try to move a little bit quicker here. What comics are you writing about? Are you writing a new academic article about a comic that already has 6 articles about it? I mean, that's great, and I want to encourage you to keep doing that, but also maybe write about something that isn't in the literature yet. Maybe compare it to a small print comic. Maybe, compare it to a zine, a web comic. Write about this kind of stuff too. If this is like one of my soapbox things, it's not really relevant to the canon so much, but like I put it on everything. If you're studying the use of a comic in any sort of clinical encounter, any sort of health setting, and if you publish that without making it possible for us to see the comic, I'm gonna hunt you down and like yell at you. Make sure that you're sharing that stuff. It's important before I close the chat, I saw someone mention one of the risks of using the same comics over and over again is that people expect that that's what a comic is supposed to look like. Sharing your study comics, especially if they're not, quote unquote professionally made, is an important thing, because then everyone can see the variety of opportunities to create comics work. And then think about where you're publishing. Who is your audience, and can they actually access your work? This is basically an OA plug, open access plug. I know I have sent many articles as a librarian to creators about their own work because they can't get access to it. So that's something to think about. That's the system we operate in, but maybe try to make things open. I only have 2 things for creators, and I ran out of comics about graphic medicine in my apartment that aren't already covered to take pictures of. I have like an entire bookshelf of them in my office. But so for creators, keep telling your stories, do everything you can to get your story out there, and then stay in touch with us. Especially with librarians is my pitch, because if we can acquire your work and catalog it and make it available in, WorldCat, then who knows who might chance upon it. Then other libraries, another barrier for libraries buying smaller press things is that they don't come with cataloging already defined. And so if it's something that I purchase for Countway, our catalogers catalog it, then there is an existing OCLC record. So another library has a much lower barrier to entry because they don't have to do the original cataloging next time. So
Matthew, is it? I'm gonna step on your toes here because I think you're being quite humble. For anyone not in the know, Countway Library is the library of the Harvard University Medical School library. So getting in the door at Harvard, which Matthew does not leverage, and I appreciate that. But when he's talking about getting it into WorldCat through Harvard, that can be especially its own door opener.
Yeah, I have a certain level of discomfort with the whole Harvard thing.
I understand.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you not throwing that at us, but I'll do it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm looking over my notes and I'm basically done. So this was my last slide. My last pitch was to creators is that if you are in a position to, and you'd like to have your comic reviewed somewhere that, will get eyes, we do post reviews at graphicmedicine.org. All we ever ask is we try to make sure that we can provide the reviewer a physical copy of your work. So if you send it to us, or just send us an email and ask and pitch it to us, and if you can provide that physical copy, we're always happy to find reviewers and review them there. And looking at my notes, I had a number that I did have finished that I wanted to pitch on an earlier slide.
Please do.
Dave's comment reminded me. So that survey that we did, there were in total 92 unique titles were mentioned on that. Right now, there are 483 catalog titles in Countway's graphic medicine collection. So I went through and discounted. There were 82 of those 483 were published since that survey completed. So even if you take those out, that's still 401 titles in our collection versus the 92 that people say are core or essential. And that's title level. That's not even including every volume of a manga. The number of items in the collection is even higher. But so that's something that struck me really strongly is the Harvard collection is far from every title ever published on graphic medicine. It's just things that I have discovered and found in the last 4 years in doing this stuff professionally. And so that's a massive difference in what we're already promoting to people. So maybe thinking more broadly was basically my pitch there. And so yeah, that was my last thing. I'm sorry, I'm a little haphazard, but thank you all for listening.
No, that was fantastic, Matthew. Thank you very much. What I would suggest is, do you mind turning off your camera just for now?
Yeah.
We'll bring you back for the Q&A. And while he's doing that, we'll have Kathy Leamy step up. If anyone experiences lag during Kathy's talk, don't worry, it's not you. And we will pick up as much of her material as is possible. It's always more important that we get the audio here, especially for live captioning, although Kathy's gestures and her her expressiveness is hugely welcome as well. So without further ado, Kathy, let's activate your microphone so we can hear. You seem to be active now. Let's hear your dulcet tones.
Can you hear me?
I've turned your mic off. Yes.
Yep. All right.
Hello.
Here we go. Excellent. Oh, I'm so glad. Good. All right. Let's see. How do I load the slides here?
Let me just mention, it's no insult to anyone. I hope you don't feel censored, that I've been moving some questions out of the chat room and into the Q&A. So if it disappears at all, that only means I wanted to preserve the question for later, not stomp on it. So, as Kathy loads her slides, let me remind you that we are, of course, recording this, but also capturing as much of it as possible on social media with hashtag NEGM20. And Kathy, no rush, but we are ready whenever you are.
All right. Let me check again. Can you hear me? Oh, God.
Yes, we can hear you. There's a small lag, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry. Big Bunker keeps giving me warning messages. Anyway, good morning, everybody. I'm so glad we could all be here, and I'm so glad, again, thank you to A. David Lewis and the whole team for getting this going. Actually, let me open the chat window back up. I was turning it off to ignore it, but in case anything goes wrong with my side, let me make sure I can see the messages. So I'm so glad that coincidentally, my talk is coming right after Matthew's, because it feels like a companion piece. I'm talking about who's in the room, and let me go into what I mean by that. And it's going to start with looking at a line in my resume. I had a patch of time where a job I had didn't work out, and I tried being a full-time freelancer for a while. And to make sure I had some kind of guaranteed income, I got a temp job, and I temped at the front desk at one of the specialty departments at a local hospital. And I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. I had such a great time interacting with patients and being an EHR user instead of an EHR programmer for a while. That was one of my past jobs. I learned so much. I took away all these observations about healthcare operations and just how the system works. And I actually ended up distilling that into a comic book, a little mini comic that you just saw in Matthew's slides a second ago. Just all the stupid little things that get in the way of doing healthcare. And unfortunately, I have since moved on to a different job. But after having had that position, oh man, it made me so eager to read other comics about like that side of medicine, like the administrative side and the support side. And I didn't find a whole lot. And it got me thinking about who's not prominent or maybe even present in the graphic medicine community. When I talk about our community a lot, I'm always saying how welcoming it is to different perspectives. But when it comes to certain healthcare roles, I think we might be missing some. So today, I'd like to take a look at that and talk about who's not in the room with us. And in this talk specifically, I'm going to focus on the front desk staff, maybe also called the receptionists, the patient care coordinators, patient care staff, because that's the job I did and that's the role I'm fired up about. But as I'm talking, keep in mind that this easily applies to plenty of other roles in healthcare. So in this talk, I'm going to cover two areas. One of them is I'll take a look at graphic medicine publications and just kind of examine about how the front desk staff is portrayed. And afterwards, I'll talk about our community itself and front desk staff kind of participation in it. So kicking off with taking a look at looking at the comics. How are these people portrayed? So the challenge for this one was I figured I gotta look at a bunch of comics. And this relates to what Matthew was talking about a second ago with canon, if it's intentional or if it's not. When we hold up these comics, we say, this is graphic medicine. What messages are they sending about who matters in healthcare? So I set out to do a bit of quantitative research at first, looking at, okay, how often do these people show up and what's it like in these comics? And I ran into a challenge that I ran by Matthew, which is, okay, what comics am I going to look at? Because, if I just go look at the ones that are on the bookshelf in Barnes & Noble, I'm going to miss the mini comics. I'm going to miss health education pamphlets. So I turned around and realized, wait a minute, I'm going to look at my own comic collection. I've got a bunch of comics. And although I usually weed the stuff that I don't need to read anymore, the graphic medicine stuff, I've been keeping all of that. So I have a ton of graphic medicine stuff that I can take a look at. All right, so thing is, kind of got to trim it down a little. What counts? What am I going to count with my graphic medicine exploration here? So I'm only counting the stuff that was comics format. So nothing that was just text with spot illustrations. I didn't look at zines. I'd kind of think of criteria here. So I'm not saying I kept all 3 of these, but these are what I factored in. Like, is it about a health condition? Is it about a healthcare worker? Maybe it takes place in a healthcare setting. So kind of the general questions, maybe, like, would I put this on a shelf of graphic medicine comics? Would it fit in when we have the conference marketplace, essentially a little mini Comic-Con? Kind of like, would I think about putting it in Matthew's canon list there? And so, how many comics did that turn out to be? That's I got a lot of comics. That's turned out to be 68 books, 13 health ed publications. So these are things like comics that are published by the Association for some condition. 11 kind of floppy comics like you'd buy at a comic book shop, and then 70 mini comics. That's 162 comics. So how'd that work out? Well, first, actually, before I jump ahead to that, what data was I collecting? So for each publication, I wanted to check the number of pages and the number of panels, because, those might not be exactly the same thing. And for each character in that publication, like, what was their role? Did they have a name? What was the name? How many panels did they appear in? And also how much dialogue did they get? Because sometimes also, they might have dialogue from off screen. I wanted to kind of have a comparison. Like, okay, the front desk staff versus the doctors, the nurses, the patients. And so this is a cool idea, but man, did I hit a wall, because that was a whole lot of work. That was way too ambitious and way too laborious, especially for getting it done for this convention, this conference. So kudos to me for my ambition, but maybe not for my grandiosity. That wasn't the best idea. So I hit a wall, but also let me show you. Here's why I hit a wall. This is the kind of work I was doing. Going through the comics and just, okay, who's talking? Check, 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 check. Here's a guy in this one panel. Check, this sort of thing. It was way too labor intensive. Pretty good for a giant project, but not something for this scale. But on the other hand, maybe I didn't so much hit a wall as much as maybe a plateau. So it felt kind of like, clinical trials where they realize partway through, wait, this intervention works. Let's just stop, and we're going to start using that as a treatment. I reached a point where I realized, yeah, all the data I've collected so far, it's made the point. If I collect any more, it's not going to add anything. And I definitely don't need to put it in a database like my original plan for comparison. That's not going to illuminate anything. Because it was pretty clear, I was rarely finding examples of the front desk staff. They were appearing in single panels, if at all. It was just so minimal, I didn't need to do the entire data set to make that clear. I did make it through 48 comics, so that was 9 books, 11 of the health ed publications I mentioned, 6 floppy comics, and 23 minis. And they were mostly all kind of memoir and nonfiction. A few of them are fiction. And as you can see, here's just a few examples of some of my notes. Those little red squares there with the star, yeah, look, there's a front desk staff. That's one. Versus compared to all of the rest of this. Yeah, I've got a bunch of papers if anybody would like to see my notes. Yeah, but it was pretty clear, not a lot of front desk staff. And right here, I'd like to take a little sidebar and just talk about this project and just some things I noticed if anybody else wants to try this kind of data analysis. A thing I spotted a lot was, what was interesting is kind of the visual shorthand and iconography around healthcare roles. You know, somebody's wearing a lab coat, they're carrying a clipboard, probably, a clinician or doctor. I saw a fair amount of white nurse caps, even though that's not really a thing anymore. Like somebody wearing a white, that's just the way to say this person's a nurse. There were people having a stethoscope around their neck. That's probably a clinician. They're probably laying on hands on somebody. I saw a bunch of, fair amount of men in short sleeve scrubs pushing a wheelchair. So that was pretty clear, like, okay, that's, I think I know who that is. But then some of the pitfalls when you've got that shorthand is, well, yeah, nurse practitioners and other people can wear lab coats. So you can't just say lab coat means doctor. And lots of other healthcare professionals, like medical assistants and people, they wear scrubs too. Like if you look at this panel from Dr. Strange, Surgeon Supreme, who are all these people? You see a lot of scrubs there, but it's not clear. Who's the doctors? Who are the nurses? Who are the medical assistants and other things? So in my notes, there were so many things of just, I didn't want to make any assumptions. So just putting down, okay, clinician, clinic staff in scrubs. I don't know who these people are. I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm just going off what I can see. And so I would recommend, if anybody else is doing a project like this, make sure you run this material by a healthcare subject matter expert if you don't already have one involved. Because I can tell you, if I didn't have the healthcare background I had, and I was doing this analysis, I would have just said, okay, doctor, nurse, doctor, nurse, doctor, nurse, doctor, nurse, 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 doctor. I would not be aware of the kind of granularity and just what's underneath scrubs. Another thing I noticed, the kind of the style challenge of cartoonists. Here's an example from John Porcelino's The Hospital Suite. Guy in short sleeve scrubs pushing a gurney. Another guy in short sleeve scrubs pushing a gurney. Are they the same guy? I can't tell. Do I count these as the same guy in my analysis? I don't know. I don't think so. I didn't, because I can't tell. It's so stylized. And something that made me laugh and just felt like sharing it was some of the character coding. Like, so for people who don't have names, how am I going to describe them distinctly in my notes? So that was a lot of fun to think of. Yeah, okay, smoochy photo boy. That nurse is mean. There's God. Yep, that's a donut / person. Yeah, so this was pretty fun to think about and review after a while. All right, sidebar over. So having taken a stab at the quantitative thing, I figured, okay, let's go for a qualitative angle instead. And this one was so much easier than the quantitative, because all I did was flip through all those comics I own, or all the comics I've counted in that data set, and just look for examples of front desk staff and to see how they're portrayed. This was so much easier. I made it through all of them. So what a relief. And so that's out of those 162 comics. Here's the pile. There's the piles of the ones that had front desk staff in them. And most of them were honestly just a panel or two. Let me talk about the kind of stuff I found. There was the example, what I call seen but not heard, where the front desk staff is just there, showing up in the story, not anything to say. And the inverse, they are heard but not seen, especially saying a lot of, yeah, the doctor will see you now. Come on in. And there were certain examples of the combo, seen and heard. But essentially, all of them, as I mentioned, they're showing up in one panel, and their role is just kind of to be an usher in the story, of moving people from one part of the story to the next part of the story. I found very few meaningful examples of front desk staff. And the few I did find, I'm going to talk about right now. One example was in Cancer Vixen. This wasn't exactly a meaningful example. This is pretty much all this guy's appearance, but he had a name. That was exciting. It's Roy. Hi, Roy. In Robert Wells' Back, Sack, and Crack and Brain, this is a funny example where the front desk staff turned out to be somebody he knew from, like, a friend of a friend from back in the day. And so that kind of made things embarrassing. in Julia Wirtz's Drinking at the Movies. Here's a front desk staff. Oh, Rachel, just commenting on Rachel's question. I didn't count some nursing assistants, like if it was a front desk at a nursing station, I didn't count that. Anybody who I thought might be a clinician, I didn't count in my research. I was just looking at, like, kind of you show up at the desk in the lobby, somebody behind the desk, I counted them as front desk staff. So here's Julie.
Let me just interrupt you to read Rachel's question into the record.
Oh, sure.
In case
sorry.
people aren't.
Thanks.
Rachel's asking, is the front desk or is it nursing assistants? Some appear to be nursing assistants as well. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure people knew what you were responding to.
No problem. That's great. So, for example, when I went through N.K. Zerwitz's Taking Turns, I qualified all those people as nursing staff. They appeared to be nursing staff. N.K., please correct me if that's not correct, if that's not right at all. But so that was an example of, I'm pretty sure all these people are clinicians. I don't know. Maybe I got some of these wrong. Who knows? But these are the ones I definitely found where I felt comfortable saying, that's front desk. Yeah. So here's Julia Wirtz trying to get her shingles seen to and encountering a front desk staff person who doesn't know what lupus is and thinks that she's making it up to get the rash on her ass checked out. Mom's Cancer from Brian, is it Brian Fees? Oh God, I just realized I don't know how to pronounce it. Hi Brian, if you're here.
Yes,
I loved your keynote yesterday.
Fees as in niece.
All right, Fees. All right. So he had his book had an example of a kind of gatekeeper front desk staff who does make another appearance later where it's a little bit softened and is slightly, just slightly less maybe aggressive context. Doonesbury, The War Within, about BD, the veteran, handling his PTSD, was I was very excited to find this example. There was Celeste. She was a character who had a lot of presence, a lot of panels, a lot of dialogue. But then I found out she was actually the office manager. So that wasn't exactly maybe the same kind of role I was looking for. I'm looking for more like the kind of lower level staff or receptionists. Well, the ones I found the most were ones by Ian Williams. And maybe because he works right in a healthcare, like in a small healthcare practice, is aware of it. I don't know. But in The Bad Doctor and the Lady Doctor, I found the recurring character of Shirley. And she was a pretty active presence in those stories. And here's some old school comics that I got from Ian Williams back in the day. Issue 1 of his mini Fear of Failure, which is kind of like, I think, the first draft of the Lady Doctor, I found Glinda, the mean front desk staff. So that was very exciting to see her. So the qualitative results, out of all those comics, 34 had front desk staff at all that I could point to and say that's front desk staff. Get a bunch of seen and not heard, heard and not seen, seen and heard. Those meaningful 8. I found 8 publications with examples of meaningful front desk staff as characters. So, yeah, it's pretty frustrating. So, again, well, actually, let me bring out my disclaimer here. Kind of like what Matthew said, I don't bring, and especially to any of these creators who are in the audience right now, because I've done the same thing in my own medical comics. And especially when a lot of these people tell the stories they want to tell, and they share the parts that they remember clearly, I don't want to get in people's face and say, well, when you had stage 4 cancer, what? I'm bringing this up here among us because it's important to us as the graphic medicine community. Like I said earlier, these are the stories that we hold up and we recommend. What message are they sending about who's important in medicine? What message are we sending? And so taking a look at our community itself, we, the graphic medicine community, we're often the engine for outreach. We're raising awareness, reviewing improvements. I went to the annual conference to Chicago back in 2011. And I don't think I'm speaking too broadly when I say anthropologists and so many more, but I'm hard pressed to say if I've ever met any front desk staff. So who's in the room? Probably not them. Oh, so my slides are a little bit back to front. Let me skip ahead. There we go. So there's the question of, well, okay, why do we want them in the room? And like I experienced in my job, front desk staff, they're the patient's first interface with the healthcare system. And they're often the last interface too. And they see a side of patients that clinicians don't always see. And they have insight and they have a perspective on medicine that I didn't really appreciate in full until I did the job. And I would love to see that on the comics page. But this is also, I'm kind of framing it as like, how does the graphic medicine community benefit? But would the front desk staff benefit? Like, I don't know, do they want to be involved? Do they want to be in the room? So I don't want to turn this into well-meaning nerds, parachute in, foist a bunch of work on people who aren't interested, and then the nerds benefit. Like, this is maybe fronting a little bit like we're empowered. I don't want to act like we're empowering them and we want to listen to them, but we're not going to actually also act on anything they talk about. Like, kind of what's the end result? You don't want to just grab their stories and run and not do anything. Like, how can this be beneficial for everybody involved and not just exploitation? So let's assuming that they are interested. We're facing some challenges here, especially around, first of all, the status challenge. As you can see from the comics, kind of it's pretty clear people don't always think the most about front desk staff. They're pretty low down in the hierarchy of medicine. I remember reading Atul Gawande's The Checklist Manifesto and seeing it was a challenge enough to get doctors to listen to nurses, never mind listening to the front desk staff. And I know when she worked in a practice, the practice had a holiday party for all the staff. And then they had a separate holiday party for just the doctors and some of I think the practice manager too. So who's that? What does that say about who matters in medicine? Like, it's just, what do you lose when you don't have that kind of cross-pollination, when you don't act like a team? Ugh. And there's kind of the demographic issues where this would have been an awesome place for me to include some research and labor stats about who's in the workforce. And I tried to do that and I didn't know what I was doing. So that was frustrating. I was looking for stats about kind of who makes up the majority of like medical receptionists. Didn't find a lot there, but I know what I did find, the job pays low, the academic requirements are very low. Maybe you just need a high school diploma. A lot of people, I just see for the comics, pretty much, I think all the examples I found are female. A lot of people are older, maybe people of color. These aren't necessarily people getting a lot of respect or attention paid to them in the world of medicine. So are they just, are they just going to see our community as just another replication of that same hierarchy? And even if we can get past that part, there's the logistical challenges. So a lot of our community's participation takes time, the workshops and book clubs and social media engagement and conferences like this one. And that might be time during the workday. Like in this conference, Friday's session took place on a workday. And that can be easier to maybe manage or justify if you're salaried or if you can count it as continuing education. But the roles I'm thinking about might be paid hourly with not a lot of time and maybe no use for CMEs. And the staff might not have a lot of managerial support. Like we were saying, comics don't necessarily get all that much respect. So yeah, the practice manager is going to let you take a couple hours off to go draw cartoons and talk about a comic book. Yeah, I don't know about that. And then there's the kind of maybe related to who the demographic is. There's the challenges of, are these people taking care of children? Are they taking care of the elderly? Are they taking care of family? And that's hard to kind of break away and take the time. And then there's the cost for just the travel and lodging for some of our in-person conferences. That's one thing that's great about this virtual conference, is that nobody had to pay for an overseas, like nobody had to pay for a fly from overseas or stay in a hotel to participate in this. So being aware of these challenges, what can we do? There's things we can do. There's actions we can take. One of them is active outreach. Now, in my other life, I work in the tech industry. I work in a healthcare software company. And one of the problems that the tech industry faces is its conferences tend to be not very diverse. And they've had to face the fact that you can't just put out a call for entries or say, registration's open, and then just see who comes in the door. If you want to diversify, you need to reach out to people and actually invite them in. You need to go find people, not just post a sign and say, well, we did our work. If they didn't come in, that's on them. We tried. No, you need to try harder. You need to go out and look up people and meet these people. And when you invite them here, when you invite them into our community, you got to make sure they feel welcomed. You got to make sure they feel invited and they feel safe to share the things that I talked about, like safe to speak up to doctors and to nurses and not feel like they're going to be looked down on or they're going to have any professional repercussions. Another possible thing we could do is collaborations. A model I really like and I think could apply here is the Center for Cartoon Studies made these, they teamed up with the VA hospital and made these anthologies of teaming up a cartoonist with a veteran to tell the veteran's stories. And that's a model we could do here, of maybe making like a front desk anthology of talking to, okay, let's get them to share their stories, teaming up with a cartoonist. And then finally, just go start some conversation. I don't work out in the field anymore in healthcare, so you know me, I would absolutely be doing this if I could. But those of you who do work in healthcare and have colleagues who are front desk staff, maybe just go talk to them. Just go talk about, hey, I don't know, just start the conversation, share your comics, talk about it, get their perspectives, maybe see what stories of theirs could be turned into comics. It's pretty simple. And so, I focused on front desk staff in this, but as I can see people talking about in the chat window, this applies to so many other healthcare roles. As I was working on this talk, last month, Boston Globe's Stat healthcare specific brand, content stream, I don't know what you call that thing. They published this great article about housekeeping in the hospital. And again, the insight that these people have, the relationships with patients. I've included the link below if you want to take a look. And when I read that, I was thinking, oh my God, I want to hear from these people. I want to see their stories in comics. There's so many roles that we could reach out to and invite. And especially to kind of make it a little bit more topical, think about right now, the pandemic. Clinical front desk staff are out there right now going through a lot. And I bet they have a lot to share. But also, just a caveat, like I mentioned before, there's the risk of kind of being exploitative. And we don't want to treat it like, well, you're only important when you're in the context of something else. And when the world's not on fire, we don't care. So kind of bringing it back to me personally, why I care so much about this is I love getting all the perspectives, like on health and wellness and healthcare. I love filling all the gaps and seeing the facets and adding the dimensions and seeing, just expanding my understanding. And I love people. Again, that was what I loved so much about working the front desk, was talking to them and getting their stories and learning about it. And I would love for this community to be a place where I can meet even more kinds of people. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kathy, that was terrific. And I think you handled all the technical aspects of
Woohoo! Take that, lag.
but you can still just mute your microphone. You don't have to turn it off entirely because we're going to invite you and Matthew back after Maria's presentation. Maria, if you're able to activate your camera, we'll wait for it to spin up. We're patient here. We're calm. Think of the time that we're not spending switching laptops and calling the hotel AV people in to tell us why the projector isn't working.
Oh, yes.
There is some much deserved applause and appreciation being extended, not just in the chat room, but across Twitter as well. So, yeah.
That was a great presentation.
It was terrific. And I love how Matthew and Kathy's fit together. And I truly feel, I'm biased here because I was assembled the program, I feel Maria's fits very well too. So Maria, let's activate your slides. Very nice. Very good. I will once again step back my video. Everyone, at the conclusion of Maria's presentation, please stick around. I don't know that we're going to get to hear from Lara K. Ronan today, although if we do get information from them, we will include it in videos and emails. Let me just mention one last thing before Maria begins. Part of what I'll be discussing in the closing remarks today is how we keep this going. So as we enter the Q&A after Maria's talk, we can discuss things that we want to come out of this conference, what we want it, my voice is going, what we want it to lead to, and future virtual events. But that is enough of me. Maria, are you ready to rock?
I'm about as ready as I'll ever be, so yes.
All right, I'm stepping back. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Good morning from here in the greater Boston area. My name is Maria Fotinakis. It's very nice to meet you all. And I have two very tough acts to follow. I am a cartoonist here in the greater Boston area, and I am actually kind of newish to graphic medicine. I sort of accidentally fell into it within the last year or so from a work that I made that actually Matt gave a shout out to earlier called Liminal State, which is about postpartum and grief. And that's not what I'm talking about here today. But that was my first. Oh, hi.
Yay! That moment.
Hi, sweetie. This is my almost 3-year-old daughter, Constantina. Can you say hi?
Hi.
You were saying hello to about 50 people on the internet.
Well, this is the heart.
Sweetheart, can I get back to you?
I made a heart.
You made a heart.
That is awesome.
You made a heart.
We're really happy to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Can we now go
play
outside?
Daddy outside?
Come on, let's go outside.
I'll see you in a bit. I'm sorry. No.
Come on.
I'll see you later, sweetie.
Let's go outside.
Maria, don't you dare apologize. I don't want to. That was beautiful. That was heartening.
Oh
Thank
my
you
gosh.
for sharing your family with us.
Wasn't believe me, not intentional.
Quite all right. Quite all
Oh my
right.
god.
Whenever you want to resume, by all means do.
I'm bright red over here. It's my daughter. She's wonderful. So so I'm not going to be talking about my other graphic medicine piece. This is I want to talk to you all about climate anxiety, what we need to talk about when we talk about climate change. And my experience talking about this in the realm of graphic medicine started about a year ago. when I took part in an event here in the city I live in called Waltham. I'm fairly active in my city's local art scene. We have a pretty vibrant art community, and we're also, for the Massachusetts area, we're actually kind of on the diverse side, socioeconomically and racially. So I like to be as active in the community as I can, and take part in pop-up arts scenes and also our open studios. So we had an event that I helped volunteer and put together in April 2019 called the Social Emergency Response Center for Climate Change. It was a one-day pop-up event, free to the public on the main drag of Waltham. It's called Moody Street. It's like the downtown of our city. And the idea was that this was a communal place for healing, for people to get together and talk about climate change, what we can do about it as a community. But also a key phrase for this event was nourish the whole self. So it was talking also about how climate change makes us feel. And this to me was kind of the hook that got me involved, because I had never really heard anyone talking about that. And that phrase, nourish the whole self, and how does climate change make me feel, was something that stuck with me as I thought about how I could contribute to this event. And I'm a cartoonist, right? So I thought, well, why don't I make a zine? That's something I can do pretty quickly, and I can go to Staples and run some Xerox copies and or some photocopier copies. And I'd like to put something together to help educate the community, help the community heal, and also get people talking about what we can do collectively within our city, also within the state, and what we can do to motivate ourselves to keep this fight going. And there were a lot of art projects, and we had live music, and there was a lot of presenters that came. My little area was the zine salad bar. So the zine I made for this event was called Many Drops in Ocean, How to Take Care of Our Planet and Ourselves. And my pitch for my zine salad bar was I made about 16 different pages for my zine, and I put them all out on a table. And I let people pick and choose what they wanted to put in their own zine. I also provided blank paper for people to make their own pages. And I helped walk people through how to fold, staple, trim, the whole shebang. So they got a hands-on experience with making a zine. But more importantly for me, I kind of got real-time testing feedback on what pages resonated most with people, because people were flipping through the pages, reading stuff, saying, you know, that's not relevant to me. I already know what single-use plastic is. I thought for sure, yeah, it was like A/B testing kind of. I thought for sure the pages about like what we can do individually would resonate most, because I really scoured the internet and my own brain for things that I hadn't really heard much about. And I found some really interesting suggestions. I thought folks would be interested in that. But no, the stuff that resonated above and beyond anything else, not just at this event, but at subsequent events where I either distributed for free or sold for a minimal cost this zine, were the pages about the emotional toll of climate change. I don't know, is my camera on the slide there? Mm-hmm. This was so surprising to me, and that's why I wanted to talk to you all about it. I think there's sort of an acknowledgement that this is a thing that exists, but I don't hear it talked about nearly enough. And that was the feedback that I got from the general public at the several events that I've distributed the zine at. So just to give some context, what I mean by the emotional toll of climate change. The formal term for this, as of 2017, is climate anxiety. And you may hear through other sources that this is also called climate grief or eco-trauma. There's a bunch of different terms for this. But basically, the American Psychological Association put out a big study on this in 2017. And I have, well, you probably can't click it in the slides, but I can provide the link later. It's very easy to find. It's called Mental Health and Our Changing Climate. The APA put it out. Please go find it. It's free. And they define it as a chronic fear of environmental doom. And they go into a lot of detail about the emotional impacts of climate change, both in the acute effects from, say, if you've been displaced because of environmental disaster, as well as the indirect effects of just watching it all happen and feeling like there's nothing you can do about it. So they describe a whole number of things that people may feel as a result of climate anxiety, feelings of loss, helplessness, and frustration. And they also mentioned, especially in older folks, and older being you can define what older means, people with children, I suppose, and older, a feeling of guilt that maybe something should have been done and we didn't do enough about it. And the APA also calls out that climate anxiety can greatly exacerbate any existing mental illness. So I really found that fascinating because when I was putting my zine together, this was pretty much the only place I could find any mention of the emotional toll. And I kind of just threw 2 or 3 pages in my zine as a one-off, thinking, I don't know who aside from me is going to be interested in this. So I put some tips from the APA in the zine, and that was, as I said, above and beyond. That's what everybody wanted to talk to me about, no matter what their demographic was, no matter what their age was, everybody was talking about it. And I just want to put a pin in some advice that the APA gave, like what do we do about climate anxiety, aside from fixing climate change, is building resilience is what they're calling out to people, what we need to do to address climate anxiety. So let's just put a pin in that, because we'll get back to that in a minute. So I just wanted to give a download of sort of the discussions that I had with people as I either distributed the zine at this event or at MICE or at other venues. There were several clear themes that came up in conversation. One was a need for a broader acknowledgement that not just climate change is real, but that climate anxiety is real. So the quotes here are not direct quotes, but I've had so many discussions with people that these are sort of like a sum up of the conversations that I had. So a number of people, especially people I want to say maybe middle-aged and older, talk to me about, climate anxiety. It feels like it's re-traumatizing me. Like, I've had traumatic events in my own life. I'm a war veteran. I had actually a number of conversations with war veterans. They said it reminds me of that kind of trauma, this kind of creeping dread, and it literally keeps me up at night. But I don't want to talk to anyone about this because I don't want people to think I'm overreacting to climate change, because I don't want people thinking I'm freaking out about this. It's a bad look. But it's real, and it is keeping them up at night. And a lot of people said this, they just really didn't want to mention it at all. And yes, there absolutely is a very great point, Rachel. There's a very valid parallel to a lot of this with COVID-19. We're hearing that right now as well. A lot of people were just grateful that they saw somebody talking about climate anxiety, going, I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know this had a name. But now that I know, maybe I can talk to a clinician about it. If they weren't talking to one before, or if they do, they said, maybe I'll bring it up in my next session. It's great ammo to have. Another thing that came up in discussions was the need to feel less alone. It's sort of similar to the previous one, but there's an important difference. Sometimes people felt like they were the only people who had this kind of climate anxiety. They look around and they don't see other people freaking out. They don't see other people struggling with this. They don't hear other people talking about, you know what, I feel like I've done everything I possibly can, and yet I still have this paralyzing fear and creeping dread that, I don't know how to deal with sometimes. And again, if nobody's talking about this in the public sphere, either in a clinical setting by mental health professionals or in just the general public, like within comics, people just don't feel like it's a real thing. And a thread that I found especially important when I was talking to younger folks, and I'm defining them here as tweens and teens, people who were especially people still in high school, was the need that they had for others to stop minimizing their concerns. So we can think of young folks like Greta Thunberg as a sort of representative for that, but certainly she's not the only one. There was almost like an anger that people are not taking climate anxiety seriously in young people. So a lot of high schoolers and college students I talked to at the climate event were saying, we are terrified about what our future is going to look like, not, 3 years from now or 4 years from now, but long term. And we don't hear anybody taking that worry as seriously as they should be. Like, people's hair should be on fire, and it's not. And sometimes it feels like young people are shouting about it, and they can't really feel like they're on solid ground to make plans for their future because they're so worried. Like, what's the point of trying to talk about what my life's going to be like when I'm a middle-aged person, when I can't even bring myself to think about it. It makes me feel like I'm going to have a panic attack. And then there was another thread of my parents don't take my concerns seriously, or the other adults in their life. And that's parents minimizing fears, going, oh, it's going to be fine, we'll figure something out. And that just completely dismisses the very real and valid concerns that especially young people have. So that to me, there were a lot of young people at the Waltham event that we had, a lot of high school students that were volunteers and attending the event. And that was a very strong thread that came through of, people are not taking it seriously. And my friends and I sometimes talk about how this makes us feel, but we get completely dismissed whenever we try to bring it up. And I just want to make sure we know about that. So this is where I think comics has such a great platform and so much great potential to open up this dialogue, because I saw a lot of people recommending comics here in the chat, and I think that's fantastic. There are so many comics already talking about climate change, what it is, what's happening, what life might look like after, whatever after means, after climate change. We are starting to see now a greater discussion of how it is making us feel right now. And because of the versatility of comics, there are so many different ways that we can explore this. And I just threw up some examples that I know of in this slide and the next, but it's almost infinite because if you've read climate change comics, a lot of them tend to be like a post-apocalyptic exploration of, life through crumbling cities. And it's a cool way of thinking about it, I guess, but that's kind of a different approach I'm talking about here. I really want to focus a little bit more for this presentation about people who are talking about how it makes us feel. So Sarah Glidden's personal narrative on climate change that she just did for Inktober this past October is like my absolute favorite that I've seen. I believe it's free on her website. You can go and read it. And to me, that I was thinking about this presentation, and then she put out these comics, and I said, that's what I'm talking about. She's talking about her fears, not just for herself, but for her child. She's talking about how it personally affects her. And reading the comments as she was putting these online, so many people are going, you're the first person I've seen doing that, who's approaching it like this. And that just made me go, we need a lot more people talking about climate change in this context. And certainly there are other comic approaches. Some people are using superheroes, not just Captain Planet style and saying, we got to punch climate change in the face, but also we need to talk about, actually validating that the fear and the anger that we feel from climate change or denial of climate change can be something that we can channel. Maybe we don't think of capes as a way to do exploration of those emotional issues, but actually they really can be. And Warmer is a great poetry anthology that talks about a lot of these feelings as well. And I know there's a lot of recommendations going on in the chat. Please share them because there's so many. These are some other resources that I was thinking of. One of my favorite sci-fis of all time is Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, the fantastic manga and movie. That's to me the OG of talking not just about climate change, but also how it affects us on a very personal level. It's certainly not the only one, but it's my absolute favorite. So comics can be a great bridge for talking about how climate change affects us personally. And there are a lot of comics doing a great job of it already. If there's one takeaway I want to give everyone from this presentation is we need a lot more of it. Not just what climate change is and personal actions we can take to stop it or at least mitigate it, but how does it make us feel? So that's my key thing, number one. We need to talk about what's going on and how it's making us feel. We need a lot more of this. This was a page from the zine that I put together. And it was sort of on the back for a lot of people. So a lot of folks read it, and it was in the middle of the, hey, are plastic straws okay or not discussion. And it was, again, I was blown away how many times people said that's exactly where I'm at. And I really wish other people would acknowledge it because I feel like I'm the only one going to the grocery store with a reusable bag. Why is nobody else talking about this? So please, we need more discussion about climate anxiety. We need not just discussions of, the personal actions, but also resources for folks so they know what they can do if they're feeling this way, that they can try to reach out for help and that they can at least try to commiserate with others who feel the same way. So let's talk more about how it makes us feel. Number two, and this is really to anyone and everyone listening, we need to actively make space for mental health when we talk about climate change. and its effects, especially on marginalized communities, people who are actively being displaced right now due to climate change. So the event that I took place in Waltham, to me, it was amazing because we had a number of mental health professionals actively there who are leading not just wellness sessions and meditation sessions, but also giving out resources on how you can get help for this kind of acute or anxiety that you're feeling, and how you can build greater resilience. Yes, thank you, Dave. Yeah, we're right outside of Boston. It was a very purposeful move to help people understand that when we're talking about these greater issues, but what we can do about climate change, we can't forget the emotional part. We can't forget that clinicians are a really important part of building resilience and helping people cope with what's going on while we continue this fight. So for anyone who's participating in a climate change event, like a social justice event, a climate justice event, climate advocacy, make sure if you're there to call out and say, hey, what are we doing to help people's emotional health while we're talking about this? These events can actually be quite triggering for a lot of us. So do we have anyone in our community who's a mental health professional, or do we have people who can help us lead some sort of meditation session just to help us get some calm in this space? And very importantly, climate change and climate anxiety is very intersectional, and we need to be talking about how it does disproportionately affect a number of communities. In Waltham specifically, we have a large Central American population, and many families that we talked to at this event, they were displaced because of climate change. So I was talking to teens in high school whose parents, they had to flee with their parents because of climate change. And those teens very acutely are feeling the effects of climate anxiety right now. And they are the folks that I'm thinking of right now that really, really could use a lot more help. Me, middle-class white lady, I have access to a therapist, but are we reaching everyone that we need to be reaching? And no, we're not. So we need to be doing a much better job at making sure that we're reaching out to those who are disproportionately affected. And number 3, the note that I put a pin in earlier about building resilience. The way we do that is by fostering hope, because this climate change does feel like an insurmountable, hopeless problem sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with feeling anxiety about a problem that is very real, as we're seeing with COVID-19 right now. A lot of us, if not all of us, are feeling this creeping dread from this very huge problem that is very, very real and all around us, as is climate change. So the only way we can build resilience is by fostering hope, not by being a Pollyanna and being like, everything's going to be great and okay if we just believe. It's not like that. One of the most important things we can do is emphasize collective action. So when we're creating comics or we're creating spaces around climate change, we need to talk about community and collective action, because we have sort of for years, I don't know, since I was a kid, talked about like individual action a lot, like make sure you recycle, make sure you use a reusable water bottle. I feel like that's a bit played out at this point. It's still very good advice, but I think those of us who are worried about climate change know this stuff, and we're already practicing as much as we can. It's collective action that's really the next thing, and that's where we can foster a sense of community, especially once COVID-19 is over and we can gather together again. You're not alone. You know that you're with other people who feel the same way. So when I would love to see more comics about climate anxiety, and I would love to see these comics talking about what kind of community can you find? Like, how can we gather together to buoy each other and lift each other up so we can be stronger and more resilient for the fight ahead? And that's it from me. I have my social media information up here. I am making a second version of my climate zine, or I was planning to before COVID-19 hit, because I actually made it available through Creative Commons so people can remix it. And it's available on my website as well, so people can download it for free. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was wonderful. And I think it fit perfectly into the overall discussion that we've been having, not just in this panel, but also with Brian Fees brought up, what our workshops have brought up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to invite Kathy and Matthew to reactivate their cameras, such as they are. There may be lag or drag, but we'll deal with it as best we can because we have any number of questions coming in from the Q&A. So once I know that Matthew is back with us, we will get started there. I'm sure the system is scrutinizing him, looking at him, making sure that he really should be allowed to speak, checking his Harvard credentials. I'm joking.
I'm not Harvard affiliated at all.
If it's checking
That's
those,
all.
I'm going to be here forever because that system is very laggy.
That's okay. At least we can hear you. But we can see you as well. So thank you. We are sorry that Larky Ronan could not join us. We will try to include information from that presentation across social media and in future releases of this video, which is being recorded and will be made public at a future date. But for now, in addition to all the amazing chatter going on, and not to belittle it by calling it chatter, on Twitter and in the chat box, I'd like to turn to the Q&A now. I'm just going to start with a question that's just a point of information, if I may. Maria, when you called it a zine salad bar, is that your own coinage? I just want to make sure.
It is. Feel free to use it. I would love to see more zine salad bars pop up. We need a groundswell of zines. I'm a big zine fan, and as I think they're just the most amazing. They're just the most amazing thing. So more of it, more zine salad bars.
Okay, well, I want to make sure that coinage is attributed to you whenever possible. So
I appreciate that.
The scholar in me seems to require that. Okay, let's get down to the actual questions submitted by any number of people, including your fellow panelists. And we'll start with Patricia Anderson. This is largely in response to Matthew's presentation, but I think any one of you can speak to it. Patricia Anderson asks, what do we lose when we have a canon, and what do we gain?
Yeah. So
take that.
Huh?
So take that.
Yeah.
No, it's a fair question. It's a very fair question.
I mean, so I think the main gain I can think of is the same argument that has been used for the classics canon forever, is that it gives people a shared starting point, a shared collected knowledge base, that sort of thing. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with that, but that's the usual positive argument for having a collected canon. What are we losing? I think we're losing a lot of voices, and we're what I was trying to do by pairing that call for graphic medicine as a manifesto with this risk of canon and institutionalization is the manifesto is calling for us to reject this idea of universality, and when we're canonizing and teaching these same texts over and over, we might be misrepresenting the greater experience of, or the wider experience of those health topics. Like, for a lot of our students, it might be the only time they've read a narrative about, bipolar, or you hear this a lot with Taking Turns, actually. Students, it's the first time, younger students, the first time they've approached the AIDS crisis. And I love Taking Turns, but maybe they need to have other exposures as well. And so we're risking essentializing things when all we teach are the same books over and over. That's my answer.
That's okay. Do any of the other panelists want to comment on it? I did have one note on the side. This is something that I've spoken with religious scholar, theologian James McGrath in dealing with canonization in terms of religious scripture, which I'm not calling graphic medicine religious scripture. but just modeling. He created a card game. He created a card game that scrutinizes the idea of canon, questions what people actually favor with canon, and it seems like the sort of thing that even graphic medicine could do, so long as it's understood that the game is not necessarily endorsing canon, but instead is criticizing it, is looking at it analytically. So I'm putting that up in the chat window. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the other panelists if you had thoughts on the benefits and negatives of canonization. I'm getting peculiar looks.
Yeah, Dave,
Okay.
you and I have talked about that card game before. Maybe when we can actually, see each other in person again, we should get it done.
I have a deck here, and I have a spreadsheet of what we could do. So, future project. All right, let's go over to another question from the Q&A. I think this is a question intended for Kathy. Kathy, this is Shelley Wall asking, did you track the role of the author in each case? That is, what is the relationship of the main subject or narrator to the front desk staff?
No, I like the idea of like what you were just saying about critiquing the idea.
Mm-hmm. We're still with you, Kathy. We hear you. Go ahead. There was further question about the role of the author and his or her or their relationship to front desk staff. Did that come up at all? Small lag with Kathy, but that's okay. Oh, Kathy's typing the answer. That's fine. Very good.
So can people hear me? Because I don't know if my microphone's working.
Yes, we can hear
We
you.
can hear you. Yes, indeed. I think you're just a few.
Often I would put down.
I think there's a satellite delay.
All right. You can hear me okay? All right, good. I'll just.
We'll let Kathy type her response to that. I think she is already
Yeah.
in progress. Yeah.
Not so much the relationship. No.
Okay, so Kathy will type her answer, and I'll move on to the next question. If please forgive me.
You can hear me? Okay, good. There we go. Anyway. Okay. So yes, I counted the role of self/narrator dialogue. Oh, dang it. Okay.
We can hear you, Kathy, just a few seconds behind. We'll take your answer via chat. Now, moving on to the next question. Let's see here. We have one from Isabel Manley, Izzy Manley, who will be a presenter today. Thank you very much for including self-published creators. Are there ways to connect self-publishing artists with professors and librarians teaching classes on graphic medicine? I bet many artists would love to share PDFs or provide a run of mini comics, perhaps at a lower price, depending on their self-publishing model, to be used in class, even as supplemental materials. So the open question there is, what do we think of methods to connect grassroots self-published creators with academes and librarians? I know my answer, but let me hear from Maria and Matthew and get Kathy's response in the chat window.
frankly, I have the same question. So I'm self-published, so I would also like to know.
Matthew, do you have a thought?
So I'm trying to couch this as, okay, so the librarian answer is coming from just my academic health sciences point of view, is to just email me. I mean, I'm in a position to, like, if you let me know that you have work on graphic medicine, I would love to get it into the library. And 98% of the time, I'm able to pay upfront, like whatever you're charging for it. There's also always, so for public libraries where that's not necessarily possible, you can look into donating a copy to the library. And if you're looking for getting in the classroom, like, academic librarians can, if we can help with that too. Like, we know what people are teaching generally. If you are a social media user, I highly recommend hashtag graphic medicine on all platforms. And we have the graphic medicine Facebook group. And you can also always send an email to the graphicmedicine.org website and let us know what you've written, what you've got out there. And we know, the four of us know people that are teaching and working on all sorts of projects, and we can try to connect you with them as well. That's kind of what we're there for, to try to make connections with people.
Fantastic. And the easy answer, the easy out answer that I wanted to provide is this: that if you are able to come to even virtual conferences like this, and I think we acknowledged that not everyone is, that there are especially frontline individuals who can't, who don't benefit from this time or don't have the technology to do so. But if you can attend or just submit to conferences like these, send your PDF to the organizer, that is yet an additional way to make it known. But yes, I think we've inadvertently, but perhaps accurately, made Matthew the tip of the spear in terms of the library system, in terms of schools, in terms of classes, in terms of scholarly editions, people doing analysis, as Kathy is trying to accomplish quantitatively, or writings and publications. I think we need to make more efforts and inroads there, and I think we can. I think through the social media, as Matthew said, and some collective websites. Sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to add, I was reading Kathy's comments, looking at websites for indie comics events like MICE to see a list of exhibitors, which is absolutely a great thing to do. And that's actually how I found Maria's work at the last conference. But the key for this is the language you use to describe your comic work. If you don't make it explicit to people that it has a health element or a climate element or anything, we're not going to know to stop by and look.
Yes.
And that has been an issue. It's been a struggle for me with MICE the past couple of years. Is I try to make a list of exhibitors that I know I want to stop at before I go, like with my Harvard money in hand, and then the next day I can go for myself. But if it's not clear from your description online, there's a good chance I'm going to miss it. And then later it's harder to buy it after the fact a lot of the times.
Yep. That's how it was, sort of by chance that I even realized that the work that I had at MICE this year would fit. I think I kind of squeaked it in there to get the description. And I was like, wait, no, mine applies too. But yeah, I that's how new I am to this. So yeah.
And if you cannot afford to release print editions of your work, if that is too much of a loss leader, which is entirely understandable if you're paying for the photocopying and everything yourself, even just releasing a PDF selectively to a professor or to a librarian or to a medical institution can do a lot of work and promote it. Kathy also noted there, also blessed cartoonists, but they aren't always the best at describing and promoting their work. Sorry to take over your voice, Kathy, but it certainly bears mentioning.
Yes.
Okay, next question. Also, Kevin Wolf, I think, pointed out in the chat window, and I'm just reading this into the record, that the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum at Ohio State University in Columbus will accept all zines, comics, graphic novels, and minis and keep them for researchers. I believe that Michigan State University Special Collection will do the same. So those are also tips there. On to other questions. Let's see here. There are excellent questions here. I'm just trying to make sure we capture a variety. Rachel Walden asks Matthew, have you run into any procurement issues when purchasing from independent folks or directly from artists? And let me just call out, you've touched upon this, Matthew, but you've also noted the rarity of your position, that where you have or have not encountered problems may not be uniform across institutions. So can we start there with your particular experience, but then include that asterisk?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot. It comes up for the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable quite often, because as we help sponsor and table at things like TCAF and Artist Alley at ALA Annual and WonderCon and all of these things that you've heard been canceled around comics, we usually have a presence there. And it's always hard for libraries to buy indie comics. The reason for that tends to be that most public library systems and a lot of academic will not reimburse staff for buying the book up front themselves. And that's due to institutional or city policy. So you kind of have to push on that. If you can't, like, try to advocate for why you need to do it this way is my big thing there. From my personal position, it has not been an issue to buy comics at events. I have a card explicitly for that purpose. The biggest struggle has been with things like Kickstarter projects, which I have managed to get permission to do. The issue is that they're not considered purchases. You're technically like, here's money, I might get something back from you eventually. And universities, accounting offices don't really love that. So this is where having, if you're a library administrator on this call, you're the one that's in a position to make changes about this. If you're in a position like me, you can advocate and fight and explain that if your library wants to truly dedicate space and time and resources to graphic medicine, you have to be flexible. Yeah, so I mean, it was all a struggle up front. Like, no other, to my knowledge, and to the people, my administrative rung, no one else at Harvard Library tends to work like this right now. So we're setting the process as we go.
For what
I don't know if I'm really helping anybody.
You are.
Yeah,
you are, because at least others can say, look, Harvard has had the same struggle. Yeah,
and so I guess this is what I was trying to get at a little with creators on my talk earlier is I'm getting into traditional distribution channels is a huge, unwieldy and costly process, but that's the best way to get into libraries, and that's unfortunate. But and if you can manage an online shop, that'll help too. But
I do have to
that's also a huge.
I think you have been successful in your wake, Matthew, at MCPHS, at the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, right across the street from Catlett Library on Longwood Avenue, that we have allowed our librarians to purchase out of pocket from a fund that we have. And maybe money needs to lead this. Maybe we need a Kickstarter, an Indiegogo, a GoFundMe, or just a fundraiser of some sort to have the money there first, which purchases are sucked. I don't know on the individual institutional
Yeah.
basis, whether that works, but it's one avenue we could consider.
So are you describing, so in my head, I'm hearing almost like a, hey, graphic medicine community, let's pool money together to buy books to donate to libraries. Or is that not where you were going?
No, that could be. The money doesn't have to live at the library. The money could live somewhere else,
Yeah.
and then be purchased and then sent to libraries. That wasn't my experience. My experience was obtaining a grant.
Yeah.
That was earmarked for library use for graphic medicine.
And because it's grant money, it can follow different procedures.
And yes, to answer Rachel's question, I'm getting throaty. Yes, there are connections to Mass Art. MCPHS University is part of Colleges of the Fenway. Very nice. Are part of Colleges of the Fenway along with Mass Art. So they have borrowing privileges with us as well. Okay. Sorry, that felt like tooting one's own horn. I apologize for that. Let's go to other questions. Kathy, why don't you answer aloud, and however much we get of it, we get, and then type the answer to the following. How much time, approximately, did it take you to get through the 48 books that you did? Let's give people a sense of what would be involved in invoking your qualitative method. There's going to be a lag here, so go ahead.
Too long. Very, very long. Like I again, like I thought it was going to be easy, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, okay, this one will take a couple hours. Like multiple hours later, it was like, how am I still doing this? The problems I ran into were all the fiddly little like one-shot characters, and how do you count people in the background? And maybe there's a different way I could have captured it. That's possible. I was writing everything by hand, and it was just me doing it. So that's what made it just so freaking laborious. So maybe there's, I mean, I think I might like to reach out to people who do this kind of coding research and see if they know of ways to do it more efficiently. This was not efficient at all. It wasn't too bad for the small, like mini comics, but it was with the larger books, like especially, oh God, like Cancer Vixen and Cancer Made Me a Shallower Person, where there are so many different people. And I'm counting like, you know, waiting room patients times 5. Just, so many. So I would, if you're going to do something like this, set aside some time.
Hey, very good, and shout out to scholarly labor time, scholarly work time.
Okay, done.
Thank you. Now, this may fly in the face of some of what we've discussed, but I think it's an okay question. This is coming from a user named Why Keep. I'm not sure they're otherwise anonymous, but Why Keep asks, Maria, is there a canon list of climate change comics?
I'm sure there is, and it's ever growing. I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. The list that I gave in my presentation is tiny fraction. As I mentioned, I think there is a huge and ever-growing list of comics that use climate change as sort of the basis to tell their story, especially in like sci-fi and post-apocalyptic senses. So if you open it up to that, I mean, it to me, it feels almost infinite. Talking about like when you start to narrow it down to more, I'm going to say clinical, that might not be the right word, but more maybe a scholarly approach to climate change, that's still a pretty big set. But to me, I had a hard time finding comics about, in my case, climate anxiety and the emotional impact. And that's where I'd like to see growth. But it is already starting. So if there's a formal list out there, I am not keeping one. I think our wonderful librarians are probably in the forefront of that. But certainly we're not hurting for comics that at least touch on climate change right now, which is great.
Okay, very good. I'm just
So if people have one, I would love to see it. It's a great question.
it likely exists, but tracking it down would be the first goal. And if we don't find it exists, to paraphrase the old saying, we must make it so.
As a Trekkie, I strongly approve. Yes.
Okay. Kevin Wolf asks, I think, a compelling question here. Isn't graphic medicine too young to form a canon? He says Fantagraphic Books tried to propose a canon of all comics graphic novels perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, and that was after 100 years of comics works. And Tom Spurgeon gave a talk, the late Tom Spurgeon, gave a talk on it at CXC, I think in 2016. So that's a compelling question to the degree of, are we using even the term canon too soon? Or do things accelerate in specialty fields faster? Do we have thoughts about the age of graphic medicine? The graphic medicine being recognized as such, there are arguments that could be made that it dates back 10, 20, 100 medical illustration and ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. But if we're just talking about graphic medicine as it has been identified and recognized over the past decade or so, is it too young to be attaching the word canon to this list of popular titles?
I don't think so, because I think it reflects the actions we see. I think we see people treating it as a canon, and that's why we're describing it as such. It's not like we set out saying, like, here's our canon.
Mm-hmm.
We're just saying, oh, people are doing all these books, so I guess that's what our canon is. And also, I think with comics in general, it's like saying, what's the canon of movies? Like you said, David, with a specialty field that's different, you can classify and say this is in this more easily, versus with comics. Wow, that's medium.
James McGrath's canon card game on biblical literature, which has had a long time to form, but he's a nerd like myself, and he also put out a sci-fi edition. Obviously, all the novels across and fiction across all time, but you're exactly right. When we're talking about a specialty genre or subfield or niche, maybe it comes more readily. Matthew? He's chewing on something, folks.
So I'm just...
Dude's got thoughts.
If the goal here were to establish a canon, then perhaps it would be a little early. I'm pushing back on the very concept of canon as useful or ideal in the first place. I don't want us to reach the point where we can argue that we do have an established canon. I'm trying to stop it before it can even get solidified enough that it would qualify as a traditionally canonized thing. And yeah, I love JD's comment in the chat. Can I read it, Dave?
Please read it into the record, my friend.
Fantagraphics, as a comics publisher, has a vested interest in establishing a canon. I would trust the comics canon of graphic medicine for reasons Kathy mentions more than I would Fantagraphics. I don't want to pounce on Fantagraphics, but because they're the ones who mentioned creating one,
being representative of any profit entity.
That was my immediate thought when someone mentioned Fantagraphics building a canon, and that the greatest comic book of all time that I keep referencing, they look at there's the 500 comics you have to read, and then the 1001 comics you have to read, and all of these best ofs and all of that kind of stuff. It's just my whole thing was that we need to avoid that. Yeah.
In the time that remains, I'd actually like to quote Matthew back at himself. Yes, Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking, it's like when you see every news article about comics that are mature, and they're always listing Mouse and Persepolis and Fun Home. And I feel like that's kind of what we're
Yep.
trying to avoid
Those are the three
is
most
coming up with the
graphic-
shorthand.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like the shorthand, like, okay, yeah, again, Matthew, like you were saying, it's nice to have a canon as a starting place, but oh god, just like those are just the three. They take up all the space in the room, and then nobody ever goes beyond them. It seems like in general discussion. So, yeah. Kind of cutting that off before we get just concrete solidified like that.
And I bet there are so many titles that are self-published that, like me, didn't even know graphic medicine was a phrase or a thing that are just waiting to be discovered and added to our general knowledge. And I can't wait to find them.
I want to read one more thing from the chat, and then I'll stay quiet for you, Dave. But Patricia Anderson just said, graphic medicine should focus on the edges, not the center. Like, to me, that's I love that.
That's a mission statement if ever I heard one. It's beautiful.
So, Matthew, I'm going to conclude our talk with a question you echoed back. How might our graphic medicine work be seen as a reinforcement of existing hierarchies? Now, I think you were quoting someone else, and I would love to attribute that person.
Kathy.
It was Kathy. Good. Okay. But I think it's an open question for us all. How might our graphic medicine work as well-meaning, as progressive, as health-focused, as art-focused, as it might be seen as a reinforcement of existing hierarchies? Can we touch on that before we conclude today?
May I jump in on that? I would love to comment on that first. Thanks. I think just exactly the stuff that I covered in my talk, which is using visual shorthand, using people as props. One thing that came to mind when, like, I didn't bring this up because it was a little bit of a tangent, but I think I don't know if it's Gail Simone or somebody, there's some comics creator out there who says about women in comics, women characters in comics, if your woman character can be replaced by a sexy lamp, you're not writing the character well. And it felt like that with the front desk characters I encountered. Like, they could be replaced a lot of times by a sign that says doctor. And that's it. They weren't characters. So by doing that kind of visual shorthand, by deciding who gets the roles, who gets to speak, who gets names, that's how we accidentally do it. Kelly Sue DeConnick. Thank you, Matthew.
There you go.
Do not Google sexy lamp.
It really is a bad idea.
Bad idea.
Oh, God.
We took that hit for you.
You could quote me on that. Maria and Matthew, can you talk to the hierarchy point before we conclude?
Yeah, it's reinforcing that idea of exactly who are we not talking about, and also as creators, remembering where we're coming from and what our own privileges are, and making sure that if wherever we are at, we need to go find people. Like I have a journalistic training. That's what my undergraduate degree's in. We have to go out and talk to people who maybe aren't in our normal circles and make sure that we're telling those stories, because it's more important than ever that we give those folks who are not often talked about the platform.
Can you all actually? Okay, I keep getting this like error message at the top of my screen.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
So keep yelling at us that our microphone is on but not transmitting.
I keep getting that.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I start coughing and breathing so it hears me.
So just a concluding thought on that, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm concluding with another caveat is that we have, for the most part, all of us in this presentation been talking about graphic medicine from a Western English language point of view. And so we're pushing back at the risk of canonization within just within even a small subset of graphic medicine. And that's always something to keep in mind. Like, Medicina Graphica is out there doing fantastic work. There's a Japanese language graphic medicine group getting going. There's a ton of graphic medicine work happening in India and all over the world. And we have to make sure that we, again, broaden the scope as much as we can. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think for those of us who are creators who tend to make work, and I include myself in this, self-centered, it may be worth taking a moment when we're trying to tell a story. If our instinct is to go to tell the story about ourselves first, maybe think, do I really need to be telling the story about myself? Is there someone else whose story I should be telling instead? And maybe working with that person and not speaking for them, but taking ourselves out of that equation.
That's fantastic. We could do this all day, says Steve Rogers, but we can't because we have two 12:30 panels coming up. And whichever one you cannot attend, it will be recorded. If you were here with us today, you may have missed Laura Lee Gulge's, her Dark Star, sorry, I'm butchering her title name. She gave a workshop that I am seeing on Twitter, went very nicely. Matthew ran off to get the book, I bet. There it is. Mona Star. So, we do hope you will continue with us into today. I'm going to conclude the recording and thank you all for attending.
Thank you,
Thank
David. This is
you.
great.